What is up, everyone? In this video, we are going to look at this original astrological novella, The Unrecorded Hour, a novel of the Halyard Planetarium faculty. Excuse me. So in this video, as I stated, this is going to be in a series in videos I've been doing. I've been reading over astrologically based literature, if that makes sense, like conceptual astrology stories, novels, short stories, memos. It's just creative writing, to be completely honest, but astrological creative writing. So we see when the Planetarium's astrologer in residence dies, he leaves behind one sealed dome file, a chart with a known date, an unknown hour, and no name. His colleagues, an astronomer who does not believe in the work, a technician who has never cared either way, and a rectification specialist who has spent a career doubting charts exactly like this one, have 3 weeks before the file, like everything else in his office, to be cleared out. So, we see all characters in the Halyard Planetarium are original inventions. Astrological technique referenced in the story follows documented professional convention. No real chart, person, or institution is depicted. So, the Geometres Personae for the Halyard faculty, we have Dr. Noor Ishwell, director astronomer, runs the Halyard on a strict science budget and an unstrict soft spot for the astrologer in residence post her predecessor insisted on keeping funded. Does not believe a word of the discipline and has read more of its literature than anyone who does. Professor Emily's Talbot, astrologer in residence, 31 years, the chart's author or its subject, no one is sure which until chapter 4. Left behind 40 years of dough blancs, a locked filing cabinet, and one envelope marked only with a date. There's going to be a lot that we go over, but it all ties back into the astrology. Dr. Petra Linkvist, Dome Systems and Archives, rebuilt the planetarium's projector control software from a language no one else on staff can read. Cares about the mystery only as a database problem until it stops being one. We have Cassandra Wu, visiting fellow chart rectification. Spent her doctorate arguing that most published rectifications are unfalsifiable storytelling with a ruler. Was invited pointedly to prove it on this one. And there is Sol Banerjee, the graduate assistant. 3rd year underslept, keeper of the dome's overnight log sheets, and the only person in the building who read Talbot's handwriting without translation. Really quick, let's turn my fan on. So, now that we, now that we established every character, we're gonna get into the story. And just remember, guys, this video is for educational purposes as well. So chapter 1 is the sealed projection. A chart with no hour is not incomplete. It is a chart still deciding what it will admit to being. Emery's Talbot's dome office wall, unsigned and undated. And before I continue, I am going to go live on Meet Me, because just as the off chance that maybe I will gain viewers, I'm actually going to add, really quick before I continue, I'm going to add my YouTube profile so people can notice it's me. And I don't even know if it worked, actually. Hold on a second. Okay, there we go. I'm actually going to make it my profile picture. I think it worked out there. So if you guys download the app, you should be able to find me on there if you're in Minnesota. And I'm not sure how long I'll be on the app for, to be honest. Like, I'm pretty close to deleting it because it's just, the interactions are not very cool. I mean, some of them are, but other ones I'm just like, god damn. I guess that's life, though. Alright, so for the sealed projection, the envelope had been in the second drawer of Talbot's filing cabinet for at least 11 years, which Petra knew because the drawer beneath it still held a supply order form dated to a printer. The Planetarium had replaced that spring. She did not open the envelope. She was by training and by temperament a person who read labels before contents, and the label on this one gave her pause long enough that she carried it, unopened, to Nora's office instead. The label read in Talbot's small, backward-leaning hand, "For whichever of you still doubts me, instructions inside, do not let soul guess. He will get it right for the wrong reason and ruin the argument for everyone." "Well, he has been dead 6 weeks," Nora said, turning the envelope over twice without opening it, "and he is still managing to be insufferable from inside a filing cabinet." "You're smiling," Petra said. "I am not." She was. She opened the envelope with the letter knife Talbot had given her the year she'd taken the directorship. A joke gift, brass, shaped like an ascendant glyph, which she had used for every letter open in this office since, out of a stubbornness, she had never examined closely. Inside was a single sheet, and on it a chart. A wheel of the 12 signs, 3 bodies plotted, sun, moon, Mars, and where the 12 house cusps should have been, nothing. No ascendant, no houses, just the outer ring of signs, the 3 placements, and beneath them, in the same backward hand, a single line, 27, April, town, of record withheld, our unknown, find it or don't publish it. "That's not a chart," Cassandra said when she was called in 20 minutes later, still in her coat. "That's a dare." "It's both," said Nora, which is very on brand for him. Cassandra had spent 4 years in one very unpopular dissertation chapter, arguing that rectification, the practice of reconstructing a birth hour from a chart's later effects, was in the overwhelming majority of published cases an unfalsifiable exercise. Pick the hour that produces the ascendant you already believed in, then explain the chart backward from the person's known biography. She had been invited to the Halyard, she now understood with some irritation, specifically because Talbot had wanted someone in the building who would say exactly that loudly, while trying to solve his puzzle anyway. "Alright, there is a rule against this in my field," she said, "mostly to the chart. Rectify a chart you already have an emotional stake in the answer to, and you will find the hour you want it every time, without exception, in every case I've ever reviewed." "Then it's convenient," said Nora, "that none of us has the faintest idea whose chart this is." And here we see the first image in this video, the Halyard dome, cross-section, projector pedestal, seating rows, and 40 years of overnight skylogs stored unglamorously in the crawl space beneath the seating Pitcher is about to spend the next 3 weeks living in. The Halyard dome, cross-section. They were wrong about that within the hour or half wrong, which in this line of work amounted to the same amount of work remaining. Soul summoned to make coffee and against Talbot's explicit instruction immediately shown the chart, took one look at the date and said, "That's the day the dome opened. 1980-something. It's on the plaque in the lobby." It was on inspection the exact date. It was not, Nora pointed out before anyone got too excited, necessarily the exact event. A building's opening day chart, a donor's birth chart has to coincide with a ribbon cutting, an astrologer's private joke about a colleague hired that same week, all of it fit. The date, April 27th, town withheld, equally well. Soul's guess had narrowed the field from infinite to merely large, which is most of what a first guess in this kind of work is ever good for. Chapter 2, the first rectification attempt. Every hour the chart should have born at is a different person. Only one of them is the truth. The other 11 are just very good arguments. Cassandra Wu, seminar note, later crossed out and rewritten twice. And we see for the first chapter, Emery's Talbot. So we're going to see from different characters, different entries in the beginning here, just like a little excerpt from the characters. So the first rectification attempt, the method Cassandra proposed over Noor's initial and vocal skepticism, was the one she trusted most because it was the one she had spent the longest time trying and failing to break. Midpoint rectification, in which the exact degree of the ascendant is infrared, from which hard aspect midpoint structures fall precisely on an angle, tested not against the story but against every hour of the day in sequence mechanically, without favorites. The rule, she said, pinning 24 printed wheels to the corkboard in order of the clock, is that I don't get to look at the answer before I run the method. None of us do. Whatever hour the structure picks, that's the hour, even if it's inconvenient. Even if it's 3 in the morning, it makes no sense for ribbon cutting. And if 2 hours both produce a clean structure, Petra asked, then the method has failed, and I say so in the write-up, which is a sentence that gets cut from every rectification paper I've ever peer-reviewed. And the reason I don't trust most of them. And we see here the chart, the date known, the hours unknown, and the houses are unset. So think of, if you guys are familiar with the game and movie Clue, well, that's like a murder mystery, but this is more like an astrology mystery, you know? So the chart is inherited, it's up there, 3 bodies plotted, the 12 hours, excuse me, not the 12 hours, the 12 houses, and therefore the ascendant, and therefore any midpoint to angle structure entirely unset. By the second afternoon, they had eliminated 14 of the 24 candidate hours outright, hours at which no plausible angle brought any midpoint within the compendium of orbs Cassandra was willing to defend and print, which she had fixed before starting at a conservative half a degree for an angular structure this important. 10 hours remained live. 2 of them produced a strikingly tight Sun-Saturn structure on the ascendant, tight enough that Noor, who had said at the outset she wanted nothing to do with any of this, found herself checking the arithmetic twice before admitting out loud that it held. That's not nothing, she said, which from Noor was closer to an endorsement that anyone in the room had heard her give the discipline in 40 years on staff together. It's not everything either, said Cassandra, not looking up. 2 hours, 6 hours apart, both clean. That's exactly the kind of result that gets published as a single confident hour by someone who stopped checking after the first hit. We are not doing that. And there is going to be technical notes, usually at the bottom as well. So you see midpoint-based rectification, in which candidate ascendant degrees are tested against which hard aspect midpoint structures fall exactly on an angle. Chapter 3 is the silent hours. The sky does not lie about what time it was. It only refuses to say why anyone was watching it. Soul energy. Overnight log, margin note. The tiebreaker, when it came from the crawl space and not from the corkboard. Petra had spent 2 nights beneath the seating rows with a flashlight and the dome's overnight logbooks, 40 years of them kept because Talbot had once told the departing director that throwing out an observation log was how an institution admitted it no longer believed its own instruments. Looking for anything logged on or near the 27th of April in the dome's founding year. She found 2 entries. The first in an unfamiliar hand. Logged a calibration run at 6:41 a.m., timestamped against the observatory clock the dome had used before its own systems were installed. The second, 6 lines further down the page and in handwriting, Sol confirmed immediately as young Talbot, looping, not yet backward leaning, a hand that hadn't hardened into its later habits, logged something else entirely. 6:14 a.m., first light through the aperture before the dome was sealed for the day's calibration. No one else here yet, worth remembering. And we see reconstructed eastern sky for the morning of the 27th, with both candidate hours marked against the ecliptic, the calibration run at 6:41 and Talbot's own unofficial 6:14. Eastern horizon, dome archive reconstruction for April 27th, time of record. We see the candidate at 6:14 a.m. and the candidate for 6:41 a.m. Alright, so worth remembering, Peter read aloud. It is not the handwriting of someone logging a piece of equipment. Cassandra, who had spent 2 days insisting the method had to decide this and not the archive, looked at the 2 timestamps for a long moment before she said anything. Both hours are still live on the midpoint structure. The archive doesn't break the tie on technical grounds. It breaks it on a completely different kind of evidence, which I would normally throw out of a rectification entirely. Would you throw it out here? Nora asked. Cassandra didn't answer right away. No, she said finally, because I don't actually think this chart was ever a scientific question. I think Emery's built us a very good scientific-looking puzzle around a sentence he wrote down 40 years ago, and then spent the rest of his career deciding whether he was allowed to believe. Alright, chapter 4 is what the nodes knew. A node is not a planet, it is the only place where 2 paths were always going to cross. Sometimes that place is a sky, sometimes it's a career. Marginal note, same logbook dated 11 years later. The confirmation when Sol found it was almost an afterthought. The lunar north node Rahu for the morning of the 27th, Saturday at 6:14, within 3 degrees of the sun-Saturn midpoint, the corkboard had already flagged. A structure read in the nodal convention, the whole faculty had by now half absorbed by argument alone, as a life's activated axis, landing exactly on a signature of discipline-constrained devotion. At 6:41, the same node sat over 11 degrees away, present but not by any orb the corkboard had agreed to respect all week, tight enough to count. So at 6:14, Petra said. At 6:14, Cassandra agreed, and there was something in her voice that Noor, listening from the doorway, recognized because she had heard it in her own voice exactly once. The night the survey result she had spent a year trying to disprove had refused. For the 4th time to go away. Then whose is it? Said Sol, who had, in fairness, guessed this part on the very first afternoon, and had been told twice to stop saying so until the method caught up with him. Okay, so now we're going to take a quick look at this chart, which is rectified. And we see the ascendant, 11 degrees Gemini, the dome's own first light. As well, we're going to notice the ascendant is, of course, fixed at 11 degrees Gemini. We also notice the Sun-Saturn midpoint is now sitting exactly on that angle. The structure that corkboard spent 3 days trying and failing to make say anything else. We see some of the planets here. So it was Talbot's, and it was not a birth chart at all. The date was the dome's opening day. The hour was the moment a 22-year-old junior technician, not yet anyone's professor, stood alone in an unsealed dome before today's official calibration and watched actual dawnlight cross an aperture built to simulate it. He cast a chart. The note in the second logbook made clear. The same week he was offered the astrologer in residence post he would hold for the next 31 years, not as a birth chart, but as what the technique calls an election or an inception. Chart for the beginning of an undertaking rather than a person, cast for the moment he privately understood the offer was one he would accept. He rectified his own career, North said, and made us do it properly before he let anyone read the answer. He made me do it properly, said Cassandra. I think that was rather more the point. The reading of a body or structure falling near the lunar Rahu as an activated collective or biographical axis versus Ketu as depleting follows the general nodal axis convention discussed in the companion appendix on mundane technique. Electional astrology, casting and reading a chart for the inception of an undertaking rather than a birth, is a long documented branch of the field distinct from natal work, with its own conventions for which angles and structures are considered load-bearing. Alright, chapter 5 is the hour she found. You do not have to believe the chart to keep the promise made in front of it. There was a second sheet in the envelope, which none of them had noticed because it had been folded behind the first, and which Petra found only while flattening the pages to photograph for the archive. It was shorter than the chart, and in the same backward hand, dated some 11 years after the first. If you are reading this, someone finally did the work properly, which I mean as the highest compliment this office has to give, and which I would not have trusted to anyone who found the answer quickly. I did not need a chart to know I would take the job. I needed to find out 30 years later. Whether the part of me that insisted on casting one anyway was doing something worth defending in front of colleagues who would ask exactly the questions Cassandra is asking right now. If she's still arguing with the method by the time you reach this page, tell her she's already done more rigorous work on my behalf than I ever managed on my own, and that this was from the start the entire experiment. The dome is not owed a belief. It is owed a method honestly followed, even by people who think the whole exercise is a beautiful waste of an afternoon, especially by them. Cassandra read it twice, standing in the doorway with her coat still on. The way she had stood there on the very first afternoon, I still think most rectifications are unfalsifiable storytelling, she said to no one in particular. But not this one, said Noor. No, Cassandra admitted, not this one. This one I checked. They filed a chart, both sheets, in the dome archive under its own accession number, cross-referenced to the overnight logbook and to the corkboard photograph Sol insisted on keeping despite Petra's objection that a corkboard was not technically an archival object. Talbot's office was cleared out the following week, on schedule exactly as planned. The letter knife stayed on Noor's desk. It is there still, and it still opens the mail, and no one on the current staff has ever been told to stop using it. And afterward, a note on the method of the rectification technique the Halyard faculty argued over in the story. Narrowing a chart's unknown hour by testing which candidate ascendant produces a tight orb discipline midpoint structure on an angle is drawn from real documented practice within the Hamburg School cosmobiology tradition, alongside the nodal axis reading used as its tiebreaker. Cassandra's methodological objection that most published rectifications are constructed backward from a known biography and are therefore unfalsifiable, is also a real and substantive critique within the field. There's a lot of astrological critiques. And I might make a video about, like, why is astrology possibly not real? Which I'm gonna go ahead and give you guys the opposite, which I feel like I already made that video, but we'll see. I have some other videos I have to make before that, of course. So this is also a real and substantive critique within the field, not a straw man invented for the plot. The chart, the dome, the logbooks, and every member of the Halyard faculty are, however, entirely invented for this novella, this video. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Piscean out.